So 1 referring to Valencia Majombosi, and the gifts refer to her ability as a doctor to heal and bring comfort to others. Her gifts are devoured by the mud as her coffin is placed into the ground. And along with that goes our hopes. Okay. There's a very obvious contrast here. The vibrant colors of the scene that we start with, and then the mud into which the coffin is placed. Line 7. Oh, all you frustrate ones, powers tombed in dirt. The poet uses the figure of speech apostrophe here as he addresses the dead directly. You frustrate ones. Frustrate is to prevent the success of something or to cause irritation and anger by preventing things from happening. The dead are described as the powers tombed in dirt. And as frustrate, a verb, not frustrated, which is an adjective, because they are powerful enough to cause frustration to the government, for instance, rather than being passively frustrated. Cause the frustration. Don't become frustrated. Right? Line 8, aborted, not by death, but carry on books of birth. The poet regards the black people as being dead, not because they died, but because their freedom is taken away due to the oppression and the pass books. The apartheid government is even more cruel and deadly than death itself. It is not death that kills people, but the pass book, books of birth, right? Which symbolizes the cruel apartheid laws. So Dennis writes, he says in his interview that blacks are born into a type of death, given a pass book, and you cease to be human. How terrible. Abortion is the deliberate ending of pregnancy by killing an unborn fetus. The dead are described as being aborted, killed before they could even live, not by death, but by these books of birth. Yeah. So, books of birth, reference to the Dompas, the past books. Death, with a capital letter, death is personified. That death should have a capital letter in the original poem. So I'll just write that in for you. Line 9, arise. The brassy shout of freedom stirs our earth. Arise, the dead are addressed directly and told to rebel or arise against the government. Not only the dead, everyone. Stand up, rise up, fight. If you know the poem by Maya Angelou, Still I Rise, reminds us of that. Rise up, fight. The brassy shout of freedom stirs our earth. So there's another command that says, start a revolution in a defiant tone. Please remember to keep thinking about tone as you read the poems, as you study these poems. Think about, right? Freedom here is capitalized to show that it is important, as it is personified as shouting to wake the dead, Describing freedom's shout as brassy. Freedom is shouting at the dead. And describing it as brassy refers to the bugle in line 4, which was used to play the dirge, the last post, the funeral song. Here, music does not send the dead to their rest, but awakens them. Line 10, not death, but death's head tyranny scythes our ground. The poet said in an interview, it's helpful to know that the symbol of death's head tyranny he saw in a film in South Africa called Judgment at Nuremberg. It begins with the tanks rolling through the streets of Berlin with the panzer divisions whose insignia was a skull and crossbones. The death's head being wildly cheered by the audience. The Nazis are regarded as great heroes by the South African regime, and people imitate them. The Nazis are the model for how one should behave if you are white in South Africa, is what he said at that time. Death is personified here as the Grim Reaper with his scythe, a harvesting tool used to harvest or collect the dead. The poet compares the South African apartheid government to the death head wearing Nazis in World War II. Scythes, to cut something violently also, as a verb. And our ground is a reference to the land where the Group Areas Act excluded people of colour. Line 11, and plots our narrow cells of pain, defeat and dearth. Dearth meaning basically the opposite of abundance, a lack of something. Things are in short supply. The poet implies that pain, suffering and death was deliberately caused by the apartheid government. And plots our narrow cells of pain, defeat and dearth. Plots, a pun, a small piece of land, but also a plot where a grave is dug, or to plot, to plan something, often something evil. A cell being a very small room, a prison cell. And the narrow cells of pain could be the graves in a graveyard, the prison cells where prisoners of the apartheid government had been jailed, or the small houses in disadvantaged areas that people of colour had been forced to live in as a result of the Group Areas Act. And then, yes, dearth, we spoke about that, something being in short supply. And then this very powerful last line, the message of the poem, better that we should die than that we should lie down. If a person lies down when arrested, they show that they are surrendering or submitting. The poet implies that it is better that the people resisting apartheid should choose to die rather than give up or surrender. There's no full stop after we should lie down. At the very end, this implies that there's no end to resistance and no surrender. This line also implies that the poet has come to terms with the tragedy of the young doctor's death. She died rather than choosing to lie down or surrender to apartheid, and the poet sees this as better than dying. Dying is better than surrendering, lying down. The poet uses we and therefore identifies with the struggle against apartheid. Rather die in the fight against the apartheid government than yield to them. Her death was a terrible waste, but it was still not done in vain. I will send you this PDF if you ask me for it. You can just send me a message. That's it.